Topic is an analysis or examination of essentially what it is that is the end goal. Like, what's the end game of life for us as Jews, for humanity? We've talked many times about the idea of a grand universal vision that we have had. Thank you so much. No sugar. Water, milk or whatever.
You do want
Thank you.
flavored?
Fine. So we always talk about this, the idea of a grand vision, of a purpose, of progression, of something starting off, having a beginning and having an end. That has always been the Jewish people's perspective on philosophy, big picture philosophy. So we talk about Genesis as the beginning, and the idea of a beginning means there has to be a purpose. It means there was nothing, and then there is something for something. And then if it starts, it has to kind of end at some point once that something is obtained. So the question is that we want to deal with today: what is that at the end? What do we have to look forward to? And specifically, Messianic era, resurrection, and world to come. These have terms we're familiar with. Maybe we're not sure what the origin is, what the roots of the ideas are, what actually happens on a practical level, what does it mean for us, what can we do, all those questions we're going to try to talk about. Now in the title, it's a little misleading, I apologize for that little bait and switch there, because it mentioned that we're going to talk about reincarnation, but I made a decision to not talk about it. Firstly, most importantly, because I couldn't find any sources about it. And it seems like it's an issue in philosophy that is not universally agreed upon. What we're going to talk about today is essentially the core sources and themes in Jewish philosophy about these issues, and these are all sourced. And I'm not going to try to pull wool over your eyes or whatever the statement goes to try to kind of interject themes that are not necessarily rock solid. So that's that. So we have the idea of Tikkun Olam, and if you were to synthesize or crystallize, boil down the mission of humanity to two words, those would be the words you would choose. And Tikkun Olam means obviously fixing the world, which implies clearly that we have a broken world. And we have a broken world, and it's by design. And you look around, and you say it's broken. Well, what's broken? Everything looks good. Everything, my fingers all bend, thank God, and we can all see, thank God, and we all have intelligence, thank God, and there's enough food for everyone, and there's just miracles everywhere we look. Nature is just replete with miracles, and it's just fantastic. What's broken? What's broken? What's the refund policy? Why would the Almighty deliver us something which is not perfect, which is broken? And of course, the answer is that if everything was perfect, then we would play no role. If everything was perfect, then what meaning can we have in life where the idea of accomplishment, of perfecting, of purifying, of changing? Well, if nothing needs to be changed, then what is it that we can do? How can we affect change and thus have a purpose and meaning in life? Thus, we're delivered in an imperfect world with the responsibility as a people, as a Jewish people, as individuals, and essentially as a species, as all of humanity, we have the responsibility to undo that is broken. Now, what's broken? Everything seems to be fine.
Where would you like me to begin?
There are. Whenever we ask this question, I was like, well, there's poverty, and there's wars, and there's
Sickness.
Illness. I mean, there's a lot of things but most of the things are not even in our control. Right? Yes, okay, people get sick, but that's in the Almighty's control. Like that's not our mission. That cannot be our mission. Well, maybe it could, I guess, if we can do something to contribute towards that. But for us as humans, there's a massive void or a flaw in our life that we need to fulfill, and that is the idea of God. And that is a lack that we have, physiologically as humans, and a lack that the world has. And the fact that we have such a complex and detailed world and just the handiwork of the Almighty, yet there are people out there that deny the existence of the Almighty. They fail to make that recognition. That possibility is a major flaw, and that needs to be fixed. The one line item in all of the world's information that is real and true and lasting is the idea of God. Everything else is dependent That's the only independent item. Everything else is dependent because By definition, once you accept the idea of God, of the Jewish definition of God, you're saying that there's one power behind everything. Thus, nothing can stand on its own, sans God, aside from God. Right? So God is the only important thing, and yet it's not present. We can't see it, we can't touch it, we can't interact with this idea on a sensory level. And it's an idea. It's even for us. Thank God we do believe in God, right? But how much of our life is dominated by this principle? I would say probably very little. It's not, at least naturally, the way we start off. We don't innately feel that presence at all times. And wherever in the world God is not present, that part of the world is broken. And essentially, that's the way it started off to begin with. That's the way the world was created, and the end game, essentially, is the idea of Mashiach. So what's Mashiach?
Messiah.
Well, Messiah. So what's that? So we think of it as
Redeemer.
as a man, right?
Oh, yeah.
We think of it as a man or an individual who's going to come in on the white horse, more precisely the white donkey, okay. And it's going to, bring salvation, and there'll be peace, and the lion and the wolf are sitting together. The wolf and the lamb are sitting together, and they're just chilling out. Right?
And the swords will be beat into plowshares, and we shall know war no more.
Right. So that's what we think of it. Now we find the following statement in the Talmud, and this is, I may have mentioned it before, I don't remember if I did. If I did, it was a while back. But it talks about a concept that I'm sure a lot of people have heard, and that's the idea of a 6,000-year world. But essentially, we're being given a block of time wherein that's the time space. I mean, this is all we've got. Now, it's very important when we mention this that the clock starts ticking for this 6,000 years from after the first week of creation. The original Adam and obviously the days that preceded that are not part of the calculation. As an easy way to remember this, if you look on day 4, we meet the constellations and the sun. What actually marked a day on day 3 and day 2 is a great mystery. If you don't have a sun, well, what exactly, what is the marker of a day? It's a great unanswered question. But even day 6, when we meet Adam, Adam in 1 hour is created. The next hour, Eve is created. The 3rd hour, they mate. The 4th hour, they have kids. The 5th hour, they sin. Like, obviously, to be created and to have a child in the same day is not necessarily working with the same time frame that we usually work with, obviously. So what that is a great mystery. We start counting after that first week is over. That's when the clock starts ticking. That's where we're up. And now we're up to 5,775. It's possible that, the original creation was who knows how many billions of years ago. We don't know. It's from the Torah's perspective. But in no way is it in conflict with, I guess, what science would say now is 13.8 billion years. We have no idea. It's not a stance that we have because we start counting from Adam. And from Adam after that first week. But we find in the Talmud 6,000 years. The world is 6,000 years. Okay? And how does this break down? We have 2,000 years of chaos, of tohu, 2,000 years of Torah, and 2,000 years of Mashiach. Which, by the way, if Mashiach is 2,000 years, clearly it's more than just an individual. It's more like a theme that dominates multiple millennia, obviously. But we're going to talk about the individual as well. Now, what does this mean? So 6,000 years, well, what happens after 6,000 years? But what does it mean? 2,000 years of chaos? Well, what do you mean? That's already chaos. It seemed like the world was fully functioning. What's chaotic about the world? What's this upheaval that marks this 2,000 years of chaos? And Torah, 2,000 years of Torah, what does that mean? Well, what's the next 2,000 years? And what does it mean, lastly, the last 2,000 years of Messiah? What does this mean for us? What does it mean a 2,000-year Messiah? I thought Messiah is a guy. So when it'll come? So maybe he'll be 75 years old. Maybe he's 22 years old. We don't know, right? We don't know who this individual is. We'll meet more of his qualifications later. But what does that mean? So this piece of Talmud, if you've heard of the 6,000 years, I'm sure some people have. This is found in the Talmud in Sanhedrin 97a. And this essentially is outlining for us the process of fulfillment of humanity's mission in this world. When I say this world, I mean the world that we're familiar with. We'll talk about the worlds that we're not familiar with a little bit later on and try to familiarize ourselves with them. What it's telling us is that the first 2,000 years is chaos. Right? Chaos in what? Chaos with regards to what? The answer is chaos with regards to the mission. Well, what's that mission? Fixing the world. Well, fixing the world, what's broken in the world? Right? What's lacking about the world? Well, the fact that God is not present. Right? God is not ubiquitous. God is not known to all. That idea is still foreign, to most people. And then what happens at the end? In the year 1948, using that same calendar, it's an easy number to remember because it's the same year as the founding of the State of Israel in our secular calendar that we use. We meet a fellow by the name of Abraham. Now, Abraham is the one who's going to develop an idea and start preaching it to the masses. He's going to go join the debate club and go from town to town, giving lectures and debating people and introducing an idea that was completely foreign at the time. And that's the idea of one God, one power. And to us, obviously, we're already at the end of the Messiah trimester, so to speak. To us, we can't even imagine what it was like in a world where the idea of all powers being consolidated in one entity is not known. Because today we're already at the kind of the tail end of the mass dissemination of this idea. But Abraham emerges at a time where that was totally foreign. In fact, 2,000 years ago, so this is relatively recently, the Romans would persecute the Jews for being atheists. The Romans, according to Dio Cassius, the great Roman historian, they had in excess of 30,000 gods. Right? Every single entity or every single power had its own deity. Thus, there's so many different powers, so many deities, and every nation that they would absorb also their deities. And the Jews come and they have this radical idea that no, there's only one power, and you know what? This is something that you cannot see, you can't touch, you can't interact with on a physical level. It's not bound by the rules of time and space, and boom, mind blown. What does that even mean? These are atheists. These people don't believe in God. As recently as 2,000 years ago, our perspective on theology was totally out there. And now today we look at what it's like, and in large part due to the Christians and the Muslims, but the idea of, or at least something close to the idea of what of the Jewish God is kind of well known, and essentially that's really the only perspective. If an atheist doesn't believe in God, well, which God does he not believe in? It's not the little statuette that you put in the corner and you genuflect to it every Monday and Thursday, right? It's the Jewish God essentially. If God does exist, everyone agrees that that's the definition. Yes, some people don't believe. Okay, but the vernacular is rife. Everyone knows it. It's widespread. It's totally has totally conquered almost all, I would say. But when Abraham emerges, he's a radical idea, and he's a reformer essentially, and he had to face a lot of conflict and a lot of persecution for coming up with these new ideas. But he was the one who was going to begin the process of undoing this flaw, this lack that the world has. And obviously Abraham is just one man. He's a man who starts, a family, small little family. He perhaps is going to become a tribe. It's a family, it's a tribe. It's a movement, if you will. We know that Abraham really, he went out of his way to try to teach these ideas to everyone. But the idea of chaos, the idea of total lack of awareness of the idea, that's already gone. Once Abraham, the powerful force that he was, his great innovations that he had, and the tremendous efforts that he made towards spreading this idea, that ended the chaos. And that transitioned the world into a time, okay, there's partial knowledge of the idea, and now is where Abraham is told, your kids are going to be a nation. Where essentially what happens to the mission of humanity is transferred from the individual to the nation. Abraham is told, your kids are chosen, they're going to have the land of Israel, they're going to have the spiritual land, because you chose God and you accepted upon yourself this important mission. And your efforts as an individual are going to be expanded, right, to a national scale. and that's the Jewish nation. And the idea of chosen people, by the way, we're chosen. We're chosen for a purpose, not just that. Oh, we're better. Oh, I'm better. We're cooler. We're better. God likes us more. It's more sophisticated than that, right? We're chosen not randomly. It's not like we won the God lottery. We're chosen because we happen to be descendants of Abraham. And Abraham, on his own, with his own intelligence, with his own capabilities, with his own qualities, he determined the idea of God, and he stood up for this ideal. Thus, God says, your kids are going to follow along in your path. And additionally, all the people that join the Jewish nation are going to be part of this mission, and they're going to complete what you began, or at least they're going to further develop what you began. So the idea, the mission is being transformed from an individual, perhaps a family, to a national scale. And that's the idea of Torah. Right? And that's the 2,000 years of Torah, where is the Jewish nation, right, on an insular level. It's just the Jewish nation. They're the ones, guided by the Torah, who as a nation is going to live up to the ideal of God. It's going to be the dominating force of their lives. It's going to be what they teach their kids. It's going to be what they value. It's going to be their priority. And this the God idea is going to take on a national level to it. Now, what happens during the last 2,000 years? In order for it to be complete, in order for us to have a fixed world completely, we're going to have universal knowledge. Is there a question there? So sorry. We're going to have universal knowledge of this idea. It's not enough to say, okay, there's one nation that has the idea of God. It's not that one nation lives by the principles of God. That's fantastic, but and the idea of a light to the nation, we as Jews are going to have to influence the entire world. And the end game, or at least the end game for this 6,000 year period, is where the entire nation, not the entire nation, the entire world is familiar with the idea and accepts that idea. We say on Rosh Hashanah, Rosh Hashanah is the time where we pray for this. We say that if only everyone knew, every creation will know that you created him, right? And every individual will know that that you exist. And everyone that has a soul will say the Almighty, right? Hashem Elokei Yisrael Melech Malchus V'Kol V'Shalom. That God, the King of Israel, the God of Israel, is a king and he has total domination, total dominion over all. That's what it looks like at the end. It's not just us, the Jewish people. It's the entire world. Now, Maimonides, we'll be talking about him a lot today, but he asked the question. He says, "Okay, so we as Jews, we're in charge of this mission. Well, what's the role of the Christians and the Muslims?" So he says, very interestingly, we kind of hinted it towards it earlier. Their role is to kind of help the Jewish people achieve mass realization of this idea. And it's actually interesting because we know that the Arabs or the Muslims, they descend from Ishmael. Ishmael was the son of Abraham. So the Abrahamic influence is also affecting the billion or so Muslims who accept the Jewish definition of God at its purest form as a true reality. So ironically, we have a lot of altercations with our Muslim cousins now. And that's actually a relatively new thing, but that's a reality. But their definition of God mirrors ours exactly. The application is a little awry, but that acceptance, and to us, that's a certain measure of tikkun olam, of fixing the world, where you have a billion people, an enormous amount of people that accept this ideal, this one true ideal, as a true reality, and live by that ideal. And that's, once again, continuing Abraham's legacy. And the Christians as well. We know that in Jewish philosophy, the Christians come from Edom. Edom was from Esau, Abraham's grandson. That became Rome, which eventually became the Byzantine, which is Christian Rome. And they, too, as fulfilling the Abrahamic family's duty, they made great strides in at least bringing the world at large, their perspective of God, a lot closer to the Jewish, or the Jewish reality, Abraham's perspective of God. Now, truth be told, the Christian definition of God is not exactly one God. What it is somewhat of a unclear, or at least not agreed upon truth. But either way, it's still significantly closer than paganism. And the end game. So what does it look like? I think today we look back in hindsight and we see essentially 1800 years of this 2,000-year world, and we see remarkable change in the attitude that people have towards God. It's mind-blowing. Like if you were around 2,000 years ago and you had to project to the future, how much of an inroads would the Jewish idea of God make in the world? You would say nil, zero, nada, zilch, nothing. Why? Because the Jewish people were a tormented people, very small, and likely going to be expunged from humanity. That was what you would have predicted. But now, with the gift of hindsight, we see how this 2,000 years has been a remarkable transformation in the world's attitude towards God, and that is fulfilling this last third of the world's progress. Are we done yet? Obviously not. We would know if we're done yet. But we've made tremendous strides, and we see it, and we could already see an eye to the future. We could project a little bit as to what it would look like when this Messiah era comes to a close. Now, that's the point. There's a distinction between the Messiah era, this 2,000-year era of universal dissemination of the idea of God, and the individual Messiah. We get the idea of the individual of Messiah. I wanted to say one more point here, which I think maybe it might be the most important point that we have had, and we'll come back to it again as well. So we see, if we were to say these three groups of 2,000, we have Abraham as the great hero of ending the era of chaos. He has this tremendous idea that he develops, and he, is very passionate about it, and ushers in a new world. Then we have the idea of Torah, and who would be the great hero from the middle 2,000 years?
Moses.
That would be Moses, right? Moses, the one who gives us the Torah. He is at the helm of the leadership when we become a nation, and he guides us towards how we're going to actually act and behave as the nation of God. And he obviously gives us the Torah, which is the guidebook. And who would be the great hero of the last 2,000 years? That would be that individual Messiah. Now we're told, very interestingly, this is a callback to a previous class that we gave here a few weeks ago. We're told that in 3 times in Jewish writings, we're told about great Jewish leaders that come on donkeys. We mentioned riding on donkeys. We know that Abraham is told that we know that Abraham rides on a donkey. Moses comes to Egypt on a donkey, and we're told many times about Messiah is an ani arochav al chamor. He is a poor person who rides on a donkey. Now, it could be that it's just a mere coincidence, the transportational methods of great Jewish leaders. It's possible. But then we find in the Talmud that the Talmud says, very interestingly, that the same donkey that Abraham rode on his way to the Akedah, to the binding of Isaac, is the same donkey that Moses rode to Egypt to begin the salvation of the Jewish people, and is the same donkey that Messiah will ride when the time comes.
Can that be a metaphor for humility?
Yeah, well, so is it possible that there's some donkey somewhere in the world just waiting its time?
A very old donkey.
Yeah, just chewing hay,
Very old.
I don't know, but it's possible, right?
It's a
Maybe.
reincarnated donkey.
I'm trying to say.
I don't know. Maybe it's hanging out somewhere. I don't know.
Like the first issue of the subway.
So what does this mean? So Rod mentioned that maybe it means humility.
It's a metaphor for something.
It's a metaphor for something. So it's possible. It's really interesting. We know Moses was.
There is a Talmudic reference to the Mashiach. Something about one great Chacham says he wouldn't even be worthy to like step in the manure of the donkey that the Mashiach. So is some analogy?
Yeah. We that, like I said, many times when it talks about the donkey of the Mashiach.
But do you remember the other week when you gave a talk here, we talked about a donkey, and it was a rabbi,
Yes.
and he chastised
Yes,
somebody,
yes, that's
and
the Kolbach.
he was sitting atop a donkey.
Right. So when we talked about that, that's why I want.
Remember that?
Yes. They talked about it was Rabbi Eliezer. He was traveling, and he.
Yes.
That's right. So that's why I wanted to mention this. But if you remember what we said at that time was that a donkey represents physicality. Like the Hebrew word for donkey is chamor, and the Hebrew word for physicality is chomer. It's the same root of the word. And in Jewish philosophy, a donkey represents the physical or the body more than anything else. And when we're told that these great leaders, they ride on top of a donkey, it means that they have dominion.
Yes.
Oh, they're control. They have the reins. You know, they're leading the donkey. They're harnessing the donkey, but they're not burdened by it. All right. And we said at the time that essentially this paradigm that exists, where we have a body and a soul. The way it starts off, how does life start off? Who's dominant and who's the host, and who is the more minor player? Our body is most certainly dominant, and we have a soul as well. You know, we have the influence of the soul, but it pales in comparison to the body. Which, interestingly, you know, if you want to make another parallel here, we would argue that as humans, we're also broken, because the power that exudes godliness, our soul, is subservient to our body, which is the exact opposite of that. And it's almost identical to the world, where in the world, at least at the beginning, it starts off where the power of the physicality, the power of this world, the power of the things that don't last, is entirely dominant. And the one thing that lasts forever, the one thing that's eternal, the one true independent reality, that's just, people are blind to it. You know, that's chaos. They don't see it. They're walking around the darkness. But essentially, as humans, we're a small little world where we start off our life with also just this opposite reality where our body is in total control and our soul is just all the way in the wayside. And we too, have to have the little Abraham within ourselves just to have this idea penetrate, and then to maybe Torah, to have that populate our mind. You know, if we would say perhaps that the Jewish people are the brains of the world, that's not a crazy statement in any, I guess, however you want to present it. And then hopefully that would reach total dissemination of an entire reality. And that would be the idea of Messiah in us as humans. So there's these parallels. But we look at Abraham. He too started off his life as, individually as just a regular human. His body was in total control. Abraham the baby probably also just screamed and screamed and screamed at night because he wanted someone to take care of him. If perhaps you could say that if you looked at Abraham as a baby, you would see little Abraham's soul, and then he's carrying a donkey on his back, where the donkey is in control. And then what happens throughout the course of his life? He empowers his soul. He awakens his soul. He denies his body. He withholds from his body. And then he slowly changes the paradigm. And at his height, at his glory, what does he look like? He's riding a donkey. Why? Because he is now in total control of his body. His soul is the only influencer. And that's, as a human, as just Abraham himself, he is a manifestation of Tikkun Olam, fixed in the world. Because he himself is someone whose soul, whose godly part, is in total effect, in total power. And he's a representation of what the world ought to be like. And that's why we present him as a, he's riding the donkey, Moses is riding the donkey, Messiah is riding the donkey. They live up to what they preach as humans, as individuals. They are personifications of Tikkun Olam. And I think that's one important point. But this also teaches us, for us, if we want to help towards Tikkun Olam, if we want to be people that are following in Abraham's footsteps, if we want to be people that are standing up for God, so to speak, we're ambassadors for God in the world. We want to be part of this ultimate purpose, this ultimate mission that's going to change everything. How do we do it? We have to make sure that as individuals, not as leaders amongst our family and society and community, as individuals, we are personifications, right, of Tikkun Olam. We empower our soul, and by doing that, we're necessarily going to have to deny our body. We're going to have to harness, we're going to have to mitigate, we're going to have to attenuate and limit the influence of our body, and only then can we slowly try to perch ourselves on top of our little donkey. When we do that, then we have the power to actually influence others as well. Just like Abraham. Abraham influenced, Moses influenced, Messiah is going to influence. Well, how do they do it? Well, we're told they encounter themselves, then I'm not going to say we have to be perfect in order to be an influencer, but to the degree that someone is able to conquer their own Tikkun Olam, that is the degree of influence they could potentially have on other people as well. Abraham, Moses, and Messiah, they do it entirely, thus they're able to be representative of an entire massive change in the trajectory of the world. So to bring this to a more practical sense for us, a lot of people, they look at the Torah and they say, okay, Torah, read it, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And you're like, okay, does God really care what I eat? Does he really care what, it's so important that I pray to him every day? Is like, or, is it so important? Is that really what God cares about? That's a common question. Is it really important if I eat milk and meat together? Is that what God cares about? Or what kind of razor I use to shave my, is it really, is that what God cares about? That's a common question. The answer is, the simple answer, I just, in view of what we just said till now, is that all the mitzvahs are essentially creating the reality where our soul is dominant and our body is recessive. Our body is less dominant, is weaker. By doing that, you necessarily have to limit. You have to subject the body. Thus, if there's things that your body wants and you say no, even if they're arbitrary, right, but essentially you're weakening your body. By doing that, right, the little seesaw empowers your soul a little bit. Just merely saying no to your body, whatever it may be. Right? Even if it's just arbitrary, you're essentially empowering your soul. So the Torah, we could say, is a very convenient way to do that. Even if you say, is it so important if I do this? But let's say it's not important. Let's say it's not important if milk or meat, who cares about that, right? Let's assume, for argument's sake. I'm not gonna go on record saying that I'm going to say that, but let's assume that that's true. Still, right, you're telling your body no. By doing that, right, even if it's for totally no reason, you're empowering your soul. And you're creating the reality where your soul is getting a little bit more power, your body's being a little bit more weakened. Thus, you could say, we're finding the Torah, right, Kadesh atzmecha b'mutar lach. Be holy, it says. Be holy. What does it mean, be holy? Withhold from things that are permitted. Wait a minute. The Torah has 365 categories of prohibitions. Do we really need more things that are prohibited? Really need more? We need more bodily restrictions? Well, perhaps if you want to become holy, but if you want to have a dominant soul, you will maybe want to go a little bit beyond that. You want to say, even things that are permitted to me, to my body that is, I'm going to say no to it. Just merely doing that exercise of telling the body no, is empowering the soul and weakening the body and creating more of this reality that your soul has more control and more say in your perspectives and your consciousness in life. Thus, we could say that and I think this is illuminating to us just about Torah at large. Every mitzvah we could judge it as an individual. We say, okay, well, what's the meaning behind this mitzvah? Don't do X, Y, or Z. We know there's a lot of things to fill those blanks. And we could say, oh, well, what's the meaning behind it? How do I benefit if I do that? What's the cost-benefit analysis? That's a good question. I think maybe it's worthy of pursuing that. But at large, we could say any time I'm telling my body no, my body wants to do something, I'm withholding from it, right? I'm weaning myself a little bit of this heavy burden, this donkey that I'm riding and taking on my back. And a little bit more, I'm empowering my soul, and hopefully at the end game is me is anyone, right? Any individual, right? who empowers a soul to the degree where, and they totally make negligible and insignificant the effect of their body, and their souls in total control, well, then they're individually a personification of Tikkun Olam, and they'll be a great influencer on others as well. Any questions till now?
So let's all tell Steve Heller next week that the hamburger with the cheese on top is really bad.
I remember one of the long time classes, I think, you mentioned a rabbi who actually said, no, let's go and eat, so to fulfill the body's needs, so that when I attend to my soul, I can concentrate. The body doesn't distract me.
Mm-hmm.
This is.
So that's
I
a
don't
tactic.
remember the name of
Yes.
the rabbi.
So
This is opposite to what you're saying now.
well, it's not just a rabbi. If you look at Isaac. So Isaac, he tells his son Esau, I want you to go and hunt down some animals for me and make delicious, the best kind of meal possible. Why? I want to give you a blessing. But Isaac's now a glutton. He's like, it has to be fresh. I got the best, top of the line. So that is a tactic that's used wherein if someone wants to achieve meteoric spiritual heights, the donkey is going to say no. And therefore, to mollify and assuage their donkey, so to speak, you throw him a bone, so to speak. So Isaac at that time wanted to reach prophecy because he wanted to give a prophetic blessing to his son. He ended up giving it to Jacob, as we all know. But he wanted to achieve prophecy. To have this temporary spiritual ascension, he knows that the body's going to drag him down. We have to make sure that our body and our soul are sometimes on the same page. We don't necessarily always want to just be conflict with our body. Sometimes we're only going to achieve a certain spiritual height if our body is okay with that as well. So thus, if we link the spiritual greatness, the spiritual achievement, to something that makes the body happy, like a delicious steak, right? Well, then maybe we could do it. Just like we have King David's playing music to achieve prophecy. Why? Because you have to make sure your body is quieted. It's not rebelling against the spiritual greatness. So that's a tactic. But big picture strategy, right? You want to make sure that your body is not dominant. Right? That is not about empowering the body. It's about quieting it, making it amenable to what you're about to do on a spiritual level. Yeah.
Could you comment just briefly about the idea that Rabbi Moshe Kamlazato talks about one's tikkun, one's bringing himself to mitzvahs is also about almost like a generational atonement. You also are affecting like everybody around you and the whole world around you.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously we need to look at ourselves first, but can you comment about that?
Yeah, so the interdependency of all of humanity. We find sometimes in Jewish literature, I know we can talk about this for a while and totally go off topic, which we could do, but it's a good topic. And that the idea of collective punishment or collective reward, which sometimes we judge as a nation. The idea of arvus, the idea of if someone is lacking in a mitzvah, any other Jew or any other human really even, then I don't know if it's any other human, but let's say if someone of the same nation and they're lacking, I'm lacking as well. That's why, like for example, if I did a mitzvah, if I already fulfilled my mitzvah, but someone else didn't, I could say the blessing for them as if I was instructed. What do you mean you already fulfilled your mitzvah? No, if someone else is lacking in a mitzvah, I'm lacking as well. And additionally, like there's the famous statement of Rabbi Israel Salanter. He says, if a Jew in Lithuania, this is the 19th century. Lithuania that was the center of Jewish excellence in the 19th century. If a Jew in Lithuania, right, is a little bit lax in his Torah study, then a Jew in Paris is gonna desecrate the Shabbat. So the idea of like if the greater that I am, or the more attention that I pay to my activities and to my behavior and to my dedication towards what's important, that in the spiritual way affects other people. Yes, that's it. Yeah, but yes, it's a big topic, and maybe we'll talk about some other time.
The same thing. If one Jew hurts, all the Jews hurt.
Yeah, that's the idea of revenge. Like the Talmud says, revenge is what's an illustration of revenge? If someone is using a sickle to cut wheat, and then by mistake his right hand cuts off his left hand, then the severed left hand picks up a sickle and cuts off the right hand as revenge. It doesn't make sense. Like if you're part of one entity, if you're all just part of one entity, so one guy hurt, it's self-flagellation to hurt yourself. We don't feel like that, but that's in the reality. Jewish people as one, but even the entire humanity. We're told that the entire humanity is all little particles of Adam. Which is a mind-blowing idea. The original Adam during that first week, not Adam afterwards. So that's a very interesting idea, very compelling, very intriguing idea. Let's move on to Messiah the man, the individual. So if Messiah the mission is about achieving universal acceptance of the idea of God, well, what's Messiah, the individual? Well, that's someone who's going to be the steward of that transformation. And what are his qualifications? So we find some qualifications. Number one, that he's going to be a king from the Davidic line. Thus, if you're not from the family of David, you're disqualified. If you're a Kohen, fantastic, you're disqualified. Nothing wrong with that. Important that all legitimate Jewish kings come from the house of David, as we all know. So if he's going to be a king, he's going to be a legitimate king of Israel, and he's going to be from the family of David. Maimonides writes he's going to study Torah and perform mitzvahs like David, his ancestor, so he's going to be a tremendous, on an individual level, of his Torah scholarship and his activities, his behavior is going to be spectacular. He's going to be an influencer upon Israel to abide by the Torah. So he's going to be someone who's going to obviously going to go out and influence others to observe the Torah. And lastly, the last individual personal qualification is that he's going to battle the battles of Hashem. He's going to battle the wars of Hashem. Now, what that means is a little bit ambiguous. It could mean that it's actually battles. It's going to be a battle, leader, a military leader. But it could also mean like the spiritual battles of Hashem. Like our world is a conflict. It's a conflict because they're opposite agendas that are mutually exclusive. The body and soul cannot both be in charge. Right? It's not possible. Right? The body and soul's agenda cannot both be fulfilled. So that essentially there's a war at hand. Our world is a war. It's a war between the realization of God, the agenda of the soul, and our body, which wants us to avoid thinking about anything beyond what we can see and touch and think about for our 70 years of existence in life. That's a war. Perhaps what it means that Messiah is going to battle the wars of Hashem on that level. I don't know. Maybe both. But those are the individual qualifications. And what will he do? Number one, he'll reestablish the kingdom of David in Israel. Number two, build a temple on Temple Mount. This is what's called the third temple. Gather the dispersed Jews to Israel. Going to be a reunion of Jews in Israel. Oversee the reinstitution of Jewish law. Reestablish sacrificial and agricultural law in Israel. Now, if I told you this 200 years ago, you would say, everyone's going to go back to Israel?
Yeah, good luck, right?
Good luck. There's nothing going on. There's no, almost bereft of Jews. If you go back 300 years, it's almost entirely bereft of Jews. Some Jews living in Sfat, some Jews scattered everywhere, but it's an empty and desolate land. Today, there's 6 million Jews living in Israel. And it's rapidly growing. Rapidly growing. Now, of course, we don't have a temple yet built. But 50 years ago, we didn't even have Jerusalem, And 70 years ago, the Jews didn't have control all over the land of Israel, and that was a stretch. And 100 years ago, it was a dream. It was a pipe dream. 100 years ago, and I think today we could kind of really foresee how this could potentially happen. Just with progressive means. What we have today and how this could develop in the future. It's not such a stretch. If the state of Israel decided tomorrow to build a temple on Temple Mount, if there was, I guess, support of that idea, and there is tremendous support of that idea, but if they could do it in a half hour, all you need is some bulldozers, or I always made the joke.
A lot of soldiers?
No, you don't. You really don't. They don't need a lot of soldiers. They have total security control of that area. It can be done in a week. It's interesting because every Islamic structure in the world has a crescent on top of it. The symbol of Islam is a crescent, and it's facing Mecca. Now we know that on Temple Mount, where the temple stood, there's the shrine built in the year 691, which is the Dome of the Rock, which in the 1980s, I think it was the 1980s, King Hussein of Jordan sold one of his houses in London and had it plated with 80 kilos of gold. It wasn't gold till very recently. But it's an Islamic. It's not a mosque. Very importantly, it's not a mosque. The mosque is a few hundred feet over to the south. That's the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But that's not a mosque. It's a shrine, which I think a little unpopular opinion alert. But I think it's actually a good thing that the Muslims control, because we know Jews are not allowed to go there right now. When there's a temple, that things will change. But right now, Jews are not allowed to go there. Thus, it actually works out really nicely that the Muslims are there, so Jews don't essentially avoid the area. Some people go, but it's not like it became a tourist site where people are taking selfies, by the holiest site of Israel when they're not supposed to be.
Don't they face Mecca when they pray up there?
Oh yeah,
So that means their rear ends to the.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. But what's interesting about it is that this is the one Islamic structure that does not have a crescent on top. It actually has a little circle. So I once said that the reason why it has a circle was when they're ready to build a temple, they're going to put a little bulldozer and just lift it up like that and just clear it away.
I hope they will have the presence of mind to keep the gold.
Oh.
My mother actually went there once as a tourist.
Yeah.
So
There are big signs that say Jews, by Jewish law, not allowed to go there, but some Jews still go there. Even if you go there, the question is where are you allowed to go, where you're not allowed to go. There's somewhat of a debate exactly where on Temple Mount the temple stood. The most widely accepted opinion is that it stood actually where the Dome of the Rock is right now. In fact, that rock is a rock that's mentioned in the Talmud. The Talmud mentions this massive rock that was there. So there's a lot of sources that would make that argument. There are others that say it's maybe a few hundred feet south, towards the southern part of the plateau, the platform. There are people that say either way. The generally accepted position is that Jews don't go there.
So if it would be so easy to do it, then why don't they?
Well, the question is if it's not just the fact that they could do it; it's the fact that it's a confluence of factors. Where the Jewish people are in Israel, and it's the time. When it's the time, but it's the time. I think we're creeping closer to that time, and we're kind of creeping closer to that location as well.
You have to have the Messiah too. He has to.
Yeah. So, and a lot of these things are unknown to us exactly how they're gonna work out. But I think today we have a much clearer picture of how it is going to work out. The idea of coming back to Israel is we're there already. We're in Israel, and it's soon going to be the biggest population center of Jews in the world. Is going to be Israel. The United States now has some more Jews, I think, by a little bit, but that's going to change very, very soon.
About the question about being the king, what is a modern Jewish theological thinking? Is it really has to be a literal king, or it can be like a prime minister or chief
Maybe.
judge, chief rabbi?
Maybe.
Because establishing a monarchy in Israel over the current thriving democracy seems to be an unnecessary obstacle.
The question is, what does it mean? I thought that's a very good question.
Because 2,000 years ago they didn't have prime ministers, right?
Right. So
the
could
king
it
was
mean
the
that it's someone who
personification of power.
is the prime minister or someone who's a great influencer? I think that's not a departure necessarily from. We don't know, like we said. Maimonides really had his way, by the way, to point out that we don't know. The true answer is we don't know what's going to happen because we're not told, and the reason we're not told about it because it's not so important for us. What actually happens afterwards? Interestingly, Maimonides orders his books in orders of importance. We know that the first item that's tackled by Maimonides in his 14-volume magnum opus, Mishnah Torah, which is essentially all of Judaism in 14 books. So the first thing that he deals with is Yesod Torah, with foundations of Judaism. Starts off with God. That's the first chapters of God. What are the most important ideals? Then he talks about Torah and rejecting idolatry and the laws of repentance, the laws of great character. Like those are the first thing that he deals with. The very, very last 2 chapters are the laws of Messiah. And in fact, the 2 chapters that precede that are the laws of Gentiles. Right? So to me, it was always interesting that Maimonides is telling us essentially that it's more important for us to know as Jews what Gentiles need to do than the laws of Messiah. Which to me is very interesting. That's the last thing that he mentions. Now, maybe it's the last thing that he mentions for other reasons. Who knows? But he goes out of his way to tell you that don't try to make calculations when it's going to come. Mm-hmm. Don't try to bring proofs or this and that. A lot of times, especially where there's been a yearning for redemption. When things are bad, people always say, "Okay, but the Mashiach comes now, save us all." And then you make calculations, you find some proof, and you say, "Oh, it's coming now," and "Oh, don't worry," it ends. And that's not the way we work. And in fact, the Talmud says 3 things come suddenly out of the blue when no one's ready for it, and one of those is Messiah, and the other ones are Metzia, which means finding a lost object, and an Akrav, which is a scorpion. Very interesting. And in fact, it says 3 things are come suddenly, and so Mashiach is one. A Metzia is a lost object. No one says, "I'm going to find a lost object now in Manhattan. I'm going to look for someone who, for a Rolex on the floor. I'm going to look for it." You can't do that. If you chance upon it, great. If not, not. And Akrav is a scorpion. It just pounces and boom, and it stings. And the commentary is right. This is mind blowing, but it says that it's really one thing. It's Mashiach. Mashiach for some people will be like finding a lost object, a great joy. For some people, will be like being bitten by a scorpion. Right? It's not a universal experience. Right? And I would perhaps make the argument for the people who made this mission of Mashiach part of their agenda, part of their priorities in life, well, then it's great fulfillment of that. For people that worship their bodies, so to speak, that all they want is to hone and sharpen their little donkey, to them, it's going to be a repudiation of their lives. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be disastrous. It's going to be like getting a scorpion bite. Because everything that they held in true value is now crumbled to the ground. But additionally, we're told, no miracles. I'm not looking for any miracles. We're not looking for splitting the sea, reviving the dead. All that is not important to us. No supernatural signs. What we have is what we have. Wolf and lamb, that's a metaphor. But the idea of a certain calming, a certain peacefulness that's going to happen, that, I would even make the argument, today is the most peaceful time we've had in memories. Yes, we have the news, so we hear only the bad things, that happen around the world. But if you look at history, just give me any date in history, it was geopolitically more precarious than it is today. In fact, there's the sociologist, the Jewish sociologist in Harvard, who wrote a book about that. His name is Steven Pinker, about how the fact that today is becoming progressively more and more peaceful historically, which is interesting because we would think, no, we have ISIS, whatever. They beheaded some journalists. We have no idea what was going on like 300, 400, 500 years ago. When there's massive wars in Europe and there was just wholesale slaughter. But either way, one of the marks of a false Messiah is the fact that they either change the Torah or declare themselves to be more than just a human, or try to do signs or do trickery or sorcery or whatever like that to try to, incite the masses or con the masses into thinking that something special. Maimonides tells us that no, we're not looking for any miracles, no changes in the orders of nature, no reviving the dead, no changing mitzvahs. Very important. We know that the terrible false Messiah of the 16th century, Shabtai Tzvi Yamach Shemo, may his name be blotted, because he literally derailed the Jewish mission for hundreds of years. But he was the one who says, we're changing the laws of the Torah. And if you open up just the book of Maimonides, which was written before that, it says, if someone comes and says, I want to change one iota, one letter of the Torah, that's a false Messiah. That's a false prophet, and you should know that. And he comes in, and he just... And that's a result of the people being so desperate for anything to cling to in the form of redemption, that they kind of lost their senses, and the negative impact was terrible. And in fact, Maimonides writes that the only difference between Olam Hazeh, this world, and days of Mashiach is our subjugation to the kingdoms. To the kingdom. Shibud Malchias Bilvad. Now, what does it mean, subjugation to the kingdom? It could mean that we have independence. Simple understanding. We say, well, we have the land of Israel, we have our own land, we no longer need to be beholden to other people. I think that could be a very simple understanding. Additionally, perhaps it could mean that the kingdom of our body, of the Yetzer Hara, of our evil inclination, the kingdom of our donkey, so to speak, that the kingdom is no longer there, right? The kingdom that which we're totally in control of our body. We feel like we have to do it. We feel like what our Yetzer Hara wants us to do is what we want to do. Right? We're being conned into thinking that control, that dominion is going to disappear at that time. Interesting. Like I said, maybe they're both true, but both those ideas perhaps are what the interpretation of that means. But we know, like Maimonides deals with other questions. Well, what about Elijah? And will there be multiple messiahs? And what if they die? And Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, all these things that we perhaps have heard. He says we don't know, and even the great prophets don't know and don't think about it, because if we think about it too much, nothing good will come out of such a pursuit.
But it seems like, what's the point? I could see that you're looking for a Messiah who's going to bring peace to the world and everything's going to be happy. But it sounds like we're looking for a Messiah where not much is going to happen.
Well, lots going to happen.
Yeah.
What I just said, you're going to reestablish the kingdom of Israel, build a temple, gather the dispersed to Israel, oversee the reinstitution of Jewish law, agricultural, a lot of things are going to happen. It's just no miracles, boom. Yeah, of course to us.
To us, but there's
We're go-
millions of other people
Oh,
out
No, the world.
Universal.
Yeah, and remember the temple
temple
is a temple for not just the Jewish people. Ki bezi feel like out that even the original temples, even Solomon's temple, all the Gentiles came and gave sacrifices. It's not just like I said. The idea of Messiah is universal.
Are they saying that billions of people are going to become Jewish?
No, not become Jewish. Why do you have to become? You don't have to be Jewish to be good. But they're going to have this realization, and they're going to realize that the Jewish God is real, and that the Jewish people are the people that are upholding his that upheld his agenda in the world, and that the temple is the physical manifestation of this reality.
Well, it sounds like if that is.
But they don't need to be Jewish to be good, or to have this realization.
I hear that, but I'm kind of agreeing with Deborah there. If that's what the lay of the land is going to look like, then it sounds to me like you're going to have a massive conversion.
Well, perhaps. I think that even today.
They say that you won't be able to convert after Mashiach comes.
Right, so we know the times of Solomon and David, those were times where, because it was so good for the Jewish people, that they didn't allow any conversion. So yes, there might not be any conversions. But even I think today, if we were to just make projections or just analysis of trends, of religious trends in the world, I would argue that there's a tremendous interest in Judaism from non-Jews today,
As a matter of
and
fact,
that's never happened before.
Never. As a matter of fact, the B'nai Noach movement is so huge, most Jews would pass out if they realize how many people in the world, we're talking about former Muslims, Christians, Hindus, are all taking on universal Torah ideas, Musar, wisdom.
So that
Yeah.
means we're going to have temple membership go through the roof. That's what I'm hearing.
Would you mind commenting on Rav Yehoshua ben Levi says he sees Elijah, and Elijah says, he says, "Where's Mashiach?" He says, "You'll find Mashiach at the gates of Rome, binding the wounds of leper." Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah,
Because
so,
that has something to do with this, right?
Well, the Talmud says that they asked him, "Where's the Messiah?" He says, "You should go to go to the gates of Rome, and you'll see that all the lepers are sitting there. He's one of the lepers, but he's the one who, when he takes off his bandages, everyone takes off all the bandages at once, and then applies a fresh new set of bandages. He takes off one and puts on a new one. Takes off one and puts on a new one. Why? Because in case he gets called for his responsibility, he'll be ready to go at any moment." That's what the Talmud says. Now, what this means, it's a good question. Clearly, it's saying, yes, it's not talking. It doesn't mean that. Does it mean that he has to be a leper? If he's not a leper, we're not allowing. You don't fulfill the covenant. I think perhaps it could mean that he's someone who is perhaps a pariah, because he's standing up for things that people find disturbing. I think that's a good interpretation. I think that's one. You know what? What does it mean? What is a leper? Why are they sitting at the gates of the city? Because they're not allowed in the city.
Not in the inner
You know.
circle.
So perhaps it means the Messiah is someone who's preaching things that we find to be painful, disturbing, distasteful, because he's telling us things. He's pointing out our flaws, and that's something that we don't like. No one likes to be faced with tasks of trying to improve themselves and change their reality. I think that's one thing that we could say. Another thing we could pull out is that Messiah, the individual, is ready to go. There has to be, when the Jewish people are ready for him, he's there. So we have this idea of every generation has a Messiah, a potential Messiah. Provided the generation is worthy of it, and the Messiah is also worthy of it, then maybe if those things come together, then we have Messiah. Like we know, Maimonides even writes that Rabbi Akiva thought that Bar Kokhba was Messiah. Bar Kokhba, but why? Well, but what was wrong with that? Well, he died. He was killed. He was killed, and he was killed in sin as well. So then we know he's not the Messiah. He was messianic potential. He had the potential of Messiah, but he himself, maybe the nation was also lacking at the time. But either way, this is someone who seemed like he could have fulfilled some of the responsibility requirements. He didn't ask for any miracles. He didn't ask for any signs. He just thought he was worthy of it. But he seemed, I guess he wasn't worthy as an individual. But there has to be the Messiah being ready. But maybe he's ready to go. And then we have to be ready as a nation, as a people, and as a species as well for that. But Maimonides, he finishes his writing on Messiah with the following words. And he tells you like this. He says, listen, the exact order of what is actually going to happen, the exact particularities of all the details, it's not a principle of our religion. And I think, it's essentially, he uses the same word, principle of our religion, which what we use at the beginning, the very first words of Maimonides about the principle of our religion. He says, this is not the principles of our religion. And a person shouldn't spend too much time about it, and don't analyze the Talmud and the Midrash to talk about it. Don't make it a priority in your lives, because it does not bring to you not the fear of God, not the love of God. Right? The two major components of what our religion is trying to impart within us, fear of God, love of God, those two pillars that uphold our world, analysis of Messiah is not going to bring you to either one of them. And don't try to calculate it. Why? Because everyone calculates that it just messes with their mind. Wait for it. Believe that it's coming, and it's coming in the way that we describe roughly.
Somewhat of a fanciful thought, because you mentioned maybe Bar Kokhba had the messianic
Potential
in him. Jesus, as he originally was, not as the church made him later, seems to meet a lot of those criteria.
Well, he didn't.
Maybe
He didn't build a
had the
temple.
potential and it didn't.
He didn't build a temple, and he spawned.
Mamzer. So,
Yeah.
I mean, big problem.
Well, that walking on water and turning.
Yeah,
water
but
wine,
but
those are Muslim
A lot of
tricks.
that was the church later. It
Yeah.
But
wasn't-
either-
wasn't Jesus as he lived.
Well, there's that speculation around it because they say those were Muslim tricks, and that missing 12 years of Jesus, they think he might have gone to a Muslim country and
But
learned some trickery, and then came back, and that's why these disciples were following him. Like,
either way, the historicity of that whole of the whole JC narrative is a big question. We talked about this.
It's interesting.
Yeah, but listen, it's possible that there's been a lot. We have recently in the 1990s we had the Lubavitch Rebbe. A lot of his disciples.
Chabad in neighborhoods in New York still have signs for
So like this, I'm saying Chabad. I would make the argument that Chabad has had a tradition for hundreds of years that the last Rebbe is going to be the Mashiach. We know the Mashiach principle is a core principle of Chabad, which to me it's interesting because they hold the Rambam in very high accord, and he tells you not to make it it's not a principle. Either way,
It's an interesting observation. If you take the Messiah out of Christianity, it can't exist.
yeah.
You take Messiah out of Judaism, it continues don't.
Oh yeah, because it's not such an important idea. Like we have we have our own responsibilities. What happens at the end game is that's the end game. We're not necessarily at the end game. But the idea of someone who you may have thought was Messiah who dies, it's not a new idea. And unfortunately, there's some, even to this day, there's some members of Lubavitch Chabad community that still believe. I've talked to people like this. I know it's true. Still believe he's alive. He's coming back. That's not a new idea. We've heard that before, and it doesn't end well.
Could you mention his name for those that don't know?
His name's Rabbi Schneerson. He was this great rabbi who did a lot. Like he started the whole network of shluchim around the world and did a lot to bring people back to Judaism. But they thought that perhaps he was Messiah because he maybe was a good candidate. So maybe he wasn't a perfect candidate, or maybe the Jewish people weren't ready for it, or whatever reason. Either way, now that he's dead, we have to move on. And the hope is that there's a lot of responsible leadership in Chabad that they're going to move on. But
Ziyarah site was just the other day.
that's right. Ziyarah site. What was it? Yeah, was it? I think it was on Saturday or Friday. I don't remember exactly which one it was. Gimel Tammuz. Wait, so Thursday.
To me, the
It might be
important thing is Hashem says.
No, it's yesterday.
Hashem says in the prophets, in his time. I mean, the prophets say, in his time he will hasten it. So,
Yeah.
why worry about it?
And that's what Maimonides tells us again and again.
Judaism is so practical. We just need to be concerned about living our lives every day, waking up in the morning, thanking God we have our soul refreshed and can go on, and not worry about all this pie in the sky. That's Christianity.
Okay, I agree, but it's important for us to realize that there's something very alluring about the idea of Messiah. It's very exciting. It's very compelling.
I
And
don't
therefore,
agree with you. I think it's just like a wild goose chase. I think it takes you
No, but the
away
idea
from your day-to-day stuff.
I agree with that, but I think it's still an exciting idea, and it has the potential to captivate and to hold you captive. Unfortunately, so I'm saying so. Like my mind tells us, not don't think about it too much. It doesn't do any good for you, and but it could be a potential pitfall if you make a bold claim that someone is Messiah, and then they're not Messiah, and then your worldview has to alter, and that's never fun. Okay, so what does it mean for us, and what can we do to expedite Messiah's arrival? So I think what Maimonides tells us is that we wait for it, we believe it's coming, that's biblically mandated. We know one of the 13 principles of Judaism is to believe in it, but also not to calculate when it's going to come. But also, as we already mentioned, Messiah is more than the individual, it's the idea. And the idea is a 2,000-year idea, a 2,000-year process. And that is tikkun olam, fixing the world, fixing ourselves, fixing our communities, fixing the world. If we improve ourselves, our body-soul relationship, if we empower our soul and we withhold from our body, we're essentially hastening the Messiah's arrival because we're hastening tikkun olam, and thus we're bringing the world closer to its point where Messiah is a reality. Thus, we could partake in the mission of this 2,000 years of human responsibility on our own without Messiah actually coming by hastening it, by trying to improve ourselves, our communities, our behavior, our soul, and then we're doing what we can to expedite the completion of this process. We're told, we mentioned this already in one form, but we're told in the Talmud once again that the Messiah will come in a generation that's entirely wicked or a generation that's entirely righteous. Dorshatul Chayev, Dorshatul Zakai. What this means is that the idea of universal realization of one God can happen either because of us or despite of us. It's going to happen regardless. We have the choice. Is it going to happen in the best kind of situation or in the worst kind of situation? Like we mentioned, Mashiach is coming. It's either finding a lost object or it's getting bitten by the scorpion. It's going to happen. We have 2,000. We have another 200 and some odd years to make sure that it happens. However, it's our choice. Is it going to be a good thing for us or a bad thing for us? Is it going to be a fulfillment of our life's mission, or is it going to be a repudiation of our life's mission? It can be very good or very bad for us. Right? That's where our choice lies, and that's where our decisions influence this process. So that's the Messianic era and the idea of Messiah. Let's move on to the next one, resurrection. Tchias HaMesim. So simply, what this means is, people die. Everyone dies. That's the human condition. It's Someone, it's a disease that everyone dies from. So life is. Yet we're told in the Torah, in the Talmud, it's one of the 13, once again another one of the 13 principles, that there's the idea of Tchias HaMesim, resuscitation of the dead. Dead people are going to come back to life. Right? The body and soul, separated at death, will once again be reunited. Body and soul, the human will once again reemerge. Now, the Talmud brings, the Mishnah says that if someone says, "Ha'omer ein tchias hamesim in Torah, ein lo chelek l'olam haba." If someone says that there's no biblical source material that says that there will be resuscitation of the dead, he has no portion of the world to come. And the Talmud goes on to bring tens of sources, more than 10. I didn't count. I lost track of count. Sources to this effect, that there will be, that dead people will live again. It brings examples about Aaron receiving Truma, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob living in Israel, when Israel belongs to the Jewish people. Moses and Joshua make reappearances. We find many, many, many sources to talk about, where the Torah itself foretells that this is going to happen. Now, we find some narratives in the Talmud as well. The Talmud says, it seems like this idea was a very, very interesting idea to people, even non-Jews at the time. And it records a conversation that happened with Caesar and Rabban Gamliel. Gamliel is the Nasi, the president of the people at the time, of the Jewish people at the time, and he had a conversation. Remember, the Jewish leader at that time was also a political leader. So he had a conversation with Caesar, and Caesar asked him the question, how is it possible? How is God going to take Earth, right? Earth and make humans? So the answer was that imagine you had two contractors in town, two builders. One of them builds out of water, and one of them builds out of cement. Which one's more impressive? What's a more impressive feat?
Water.
Building out of water is much more impressive feat. So he said to him, all of us, well, what are we made out of? We're made out of water. We're made out of this fluids, essentially, right? And that makes all of us. If the Almighty could create humans out of fluids, out of water, certainly out of earth, out of cement, that's the answer. Which I think it's important. Like for us, it's like, okay, someone's dead, they're dead. It's final. We think of death as being final. But if we were to just analyze, if we were to just erase what we know about how life gets created. Just forget about that for a second. And just to think which one's more impressive. To take a little sperm, the microscopic size, and, to have the miracle of life just happen. We accept it for granted because we're used to it. But that is essentially a miracle. And that's a much greater miracle than taking Earth and forming a human out of what a human's composed of. If you were to disassemble a human into the various different, elements of what he is. You could buy it in a drugstore for like $5. We're not very complex. Well, we are very complex, but on a granular material level, we're not very complex. We're 70% water. You could buy a couple of jugs of water, and you turn on the tap. Whereas some carbon and some whatnot. That's it. That's what we are. But is that what life is? No, of course not. God formed us to be humans, and that's remarkable. But if God can make us out of water, certainly God can make us out of earth. That was the answer. I was thinking just as an example for us, if you were to take I don't have an iPad over here, right? So you take the iPad and you were to just separate all the materials. So you have some plastic and the motherboard is also made out of silicon. You have some metal. There's some metal around there. You have some glass, right? You have some copper wires. If you were to just make piles of materials, okay, and you say, okay, you just have them all over here. Okay, I'm going to take this and turn it into an iPad. You'll say, good luck with that, right? But imagine you had an actual iPad, but it wasn't turning on. Like turning it on, just wasn't turning it on. So you go to your uncle or your brother-in-law who's good with gadgets, and they restart it and refresh it and whatever, and it starts working, I like to think of, a human. So if a human was already around, it was working, the hardware was there, to restart it shouldn't be as hard in our minds as to start it from scratch, to create something brand new out of just nothingness. I think it's a good way to think about it, about how, to make it a little closer to our perspectives. But either I want everyone to hold the thought of essentially the distinction between how we are formed today out of water, so to speak, and how we're formed in the future out of earth, because it's going to be an important point later on. Okay, so okay, fine. So bodies come back to life. How that other works? Maybe it's a little bit of a different format. We're using not water, we're using earth. Okay, fine. What happens now? Okay, so we have a soul. Oh, we live again. Let's go back to our jobs. Go back to your company and say, I know it's been a while, but I took a long, extended break. Can I get another, can I get another? Is that what it's about? What happens during this? We just get life again and we die again and we do it over and over and over and over again? Is that what it is?
It seems to get awful crowded.
Yeah, well, maybe. Does everyone get back? Does everyone get entitled to this? Maybe only some people get entitled to this. I don't know. Let's try to dig in some deeper. So what happens? So once again, we're going to try to find some source material. So the source material is another debate between another Caesar and another rabbi. This is a little bit later on in history. This is at the end of the 2nd century. But that's when we meet the great debates that happened between Antoninus, Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, who was the Roman emperor from the year 161, I think, to 180. And he was a colleague and a friend, a dear friend of Rabbi Judah the Prince, who we all know and revere as the architect of the Mishnah, and the leader of the Jewish people at the time, one of the great Jewish leaders we've had in history. And they had a debate, about several things. One of the things they had a debate is like this. Listen to this question. Antoninus asked Rebbe this. We call him Rebbe. Rabbi Judah the Prince is just nicknamed Rebbe or Rabbi. So he asked him this question. Listen to the question, guys. He says to him, the body and the soul can each self-exonerate. Right? Someone sinned. They have to get punishment. They have to get judgment for it. Someone did a mitzvah. They get reward for it. Right? That's the paradigm that we're familiar with. Says Antoninus, no, it doesn't make sense. Why is that? So someone dies. The body is interned into the ground. The soul is spiritual, so it's a soul. It's still around. And what happens? The Almighty comes to the body and says, you sinned. He says, me? I sinned? Look at me now. It's the soul that sinned. Ever since the soul left me, I'm just sitting here lying like a bag of bones. And so God goes to the soul and says, you sinned. He says, me? I'm floating around like a bird. I can't do it. It's the body that sinned. So each one could point fingers at the other one and say, they sinned. So how could there ever be judgment? That was his question. So, like all great Jewish answers, he says, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a parable. I'll give you a mashal. What's the parable? He says that there was a king who had a fig orchard. Beautiful young fruits, whole orchard. And he hired some guards to watch it. But one of them was blind. One of the guards was blind. And one of them was lame, couldn't walk. One of them couldn't see, one couldn't walk. So they're watching. And the lame watchman says to the other guy, he says to him, hey, I see some beautiful trees. He says, oh, really? Beautiful trees? What do they have in the trees? Beautiful figs. Maybe we could go partake. Well, how do we go partake? You're blind. You'll walk into the trees. Right? And I can't walk. He says, you know what? We have an idea. How about you give me a piggyback ride? And I'll direct you. I'll say, make a little right, go left, go straight, and then we'll eat the trees and we'll split the fruit. So what happens? He climbs up on him, and they're going, he's navigating the time. Oh, make a right. Oh, watch out, there's a branch, right? And eventually they eat up all the fruits. And they're sitting there, and they go back, and they separate themselves. And the king comes and says, hey, where's the fruits? So the lame says, me? I didn't touch him. Look at me, I'm lame. I can't walk at all. And the blind guy says, me? I didn't touch him. I'm blind. How can I possibly go? So you know what the king did? He took the blind person. He took the lame person. He put them one on top of the other, and he judged them like one person. So too, the Almighty takes the soul and puts it back in the body and judges them like one person. Thus, essentially what the Talmud says, that's where the Talmud ends. Talmud is perhaps saying, I think it's a safe analysis of the Talmud, is that, yes, when the body and soul are separated, judgment is not possible. Why? Because any good deed can be attributed, each one will say, well, I didn't do it, the other guy did it. Or everyone will say, well, he didn't do it, I did it. And every bad deed can be attributed to either one of them. A human is a fusion of body and soul. It's not a body and a soul, it's both of them together. It's one. Thus, there cannot be any judgment, nor reward, nor punishment of a body without a soul or a soul without a body. Now, if we get rid of reward and punishment, we get rid of everything. Right? This is why reward and punishment is one of the core principles of Judaism. Because if there's no reward and punishment, well, then there's no purpose in activities of good and bad. As an example, like if your actions don't matter, there's no consequences. If your actions do matter, there is consequences. A parent, like if a parent cares about their child, the child's actions have repercussions, good and bad. Like if you see your neighbor doing something, you don't care about it, it's meaningless to you, but your neighbor's kid, well, then you don't act, you don't respond. Additionally, as we mentioned last week, the purpose of everything, the purpose of creation, is that God gives us goodness. God gives us pleasure, reward, but it has to be earned reward. It can't be the bread of shame. Thus, to fulfill the purpose of the world, there has to be reward. But how could there be reward without judgment, without analysis of its activities? And how could there be punishment without analysis? It cannot be. So thus, essentially, you cannot get rid of the idea of reward and punishment. Why? Because our actions, our life has only meaning because reward and punishment exists for our actions. Thus, we essentially have to be resuscitated. We have to be resurrected. We have to once again have this unity of body and soul, because otherwise there can be no judgment. It seems like there's an element of reunification of body and soul for judgment, for the sole purpose of judgment, and perhaps also punishment or reward.
Right. Therefore, when you burn people up, cremate them, that's a sin, correct?
Yes, that's why the body is sacred as well. The body, we don't, obviously compared to the soul, the body is very insignificant in true lasting value. But that's why we treat the body, the Jewish burial is about preserving the body and treating it very well, because this is still something which is part of the human. Yes, it doesn't have the same lasting value, but a human is body and soul. Who sinned? Right? The human, body and soul. Who did a mitzvah? The human, the body and soul. Who gets judged? The human, body and soul. That's why we don't cremate. That's a good point. In Judaism, we say that the body has to be treated very, like it was a vessel that held a soul. It's a vessel that perhaps will still hold a soul, and we bury it with very strict laws of honoring the deceased. Okay, so that's what it seems like, right? So it seems like reward that the reason, the purpose for body and soul being reunified is about judgment and reward and punishment. Okay, now I want to introduce another idea here. I need everyone's full attention here, because this gets very interesting, I think. We find another conversation. This time it's between Cleopatra and Rabbi Meir. Once again, I said it's very interesting that the Talmud records a lot of times that the secular people, or the non-Jewish people at the time, were interested with these ideas. It's very interesting ideas. So Cleopatra asks Rabbi Meir, she asks him like this: when people, he says, I believe that people are going to be revived. No problem with that. However, when they come up, will they be clothed or will they be naked? That's the question that she asked. Which, by the way, Maimonides, it's a good question, right? Maimonides says, when people talk about these questions, they ask all these silly questions. Like they ask, clothed or naked? Maimonides was referring to this Talmud that mentions it. But she asked the question, I guess, is it so important? Maybe it is important. Either way, that was the question that she asked. And he responds as follows. He says, you take a kernel of wheat, take a seed, you drop it on the ground, you drop it in unclothed. What happens? It emerges with a shaft around it, right? With the kind of clothing. Says, if you take something that's unclothed and you put it into the ground, it emerges clothed. You put it in a dead body with tachrichem, right, with shrouds, burial shrouds. It goes in clothed. how much certainly is going to emerge clothed? Right? The idea of a syllogism, right? If something that goes in without clothing emerges with clothing, certainly something that goes in with clothing will emerge with clothing. So he says it'll emerge with clothing. But there's an interesting point that he says, when he says this, he says, if a wheat goes in naked and comes out with clothing, then tzaddikim, righteous people that go in with clothing, how much certainly would they emerge with clothing? So he seems to be saying that it's righteous people. But if it's about if resuscitation of the dead is about reward and punishment, well then it's for everyone. Is that right? So why did he mention righteous people? Okay.
You'd have better clothing,
Maybe. Maybe. Yeah, okay, but why even mention it? The question is clothing. So everyone comes in clothes. Fantastic. Number one. Number two, I found another place in the Talmud that mentions that when they're reborn, or when they're revived, and when they're resuscitated, when they're resurrected, whichever word you want to use, Tchias HaMesim, when they come back to life, are they going to die again or not? So Talmud is a very long discussion, but it starts by saying that the tzaddikim, the righteous people that the Immanuel will resuscitate, they won't die. Once again, it mentions righteous people, so maybe it means only the righteous people that are resuscitated won't die. It's not clear, but once again, it's the idea of why would we mention the righteous? Okay, so that's a thought that we'll put on the side. Another thing we put on the side, we have like our side satchels getting full of things to hold on. I still told you guys to hold on to the thought of the water and the earth. Okay, but let's move on to another source here. This is from. I will try to tie it all together.
String this together.
I will do that.
We're waiting.
But what do we see? So what's the imagery that we got? We got you drop a kernel of wheat into the ground, and it emerges as a fruit, as fruits of earth, so to speak, right? That's clothed. But the imagery is the idea of planting a seed. It's as if we're planting a seed, and then something else emerges. It means yes, it's the same kind of thing, but it's developed, right? It's sprouted. It's something different than what goes in. Fine as follows. Listen to this, guys. This is the Talmud analyzes a verse in the book of Proverbs. It says as follows. The verse says, "The grave and the narrow part of the womb." So it makes a comparison between a grave and a narrow part of the womb. Land unsated with water and fire that never says enough. Seems like a very cryptic verse. It says, grave and narrow part of the womb. What do those things have to do with each other? And land unsated with water and fire that never says enough. So the Talmud asks, what does a grave have to do with a womb, or the narrow part of the womb? What do they possibly do with each other? They seem to be entirely different. Talmud says, the narrow part of the womb, something goes in and something emerges. So to the grave, something goes in and something else emerges. That's the resuscitation of the dead. The body goes in, it's going to come out. That's what it says.
It's locked.
So you're meaning the body and the soul, and the grave, something emerges, the body.
Well, the body's going to come out again. That's right.
The soul.
I'm sorry?
So that in a grave.
What it means is that something goes in, the body goes in, and it's going to come back out again. Okay? Now like this. Once again, we find the idea. What's the comparison? Right? The comparison is to the womb. Something goes in, the seed goes in, and something comes out. What goes in and what comes out? What goes in is a seed. What comes out is something developed, something sprouted, something entirely different. Yes, at the core, it's the same DNA, so to speak, but it's different. It's the full-blown manifestation of the potential of the seed. Just like when you drop a seed into the ground and something entirely new emerges, like a tree or something like that. What's an idea of something going in, but the thing goes in and comes out is not exactly the same thing. So to me, this was a mind-blowing discovery, where when we do come back, or at least when the tzaddikim come back, it's not just a convenient way of marrying a body and a soul. It's not just, let's conveniently put the body and soul together so we can judge them. there's an entirely new idea where it is a manifestation, it is a development of potential. Some potential goes in, and something where the full manifestation of that potential emerges. So essentially what I discovered is that there's really two different kinds of resuscitation of the dead. One of them for everyone, and that's about judgment. And then one of them just for the righteous. And that is where it's something entirely new that emerges. Where as if the potential, as if death is being like a gestation, where the true potential of what this individual was comes out into fruition with the reviving dead. That's only for the righteous. That's only for the people that are deserving of that.
Like a cocoon, like going into a caterpillar and then goes into a cocoon and comes out with a zero.
Yes.
But it's a purification process, right? That
Oh,
happens to
it's to the soul of the body. Maybe, I don't know. To me, like it's there's an idea here. I don't know exactly how to nail it down to what exactly it means, but it's an idea of development and something akin to a seed goes in, and something akin to a plant or a fruit or a baby comes out. Something new. What this means is I don't know. I don't know if we,
So what if you're righteous 6 days of the week, but the seventh maybe not so much?
or vice versa.
I don't know.
Should be righteous.
I want to know. I mean, you've got this this idea that the righteous is going to be the ones that come back in complete form. Who defines how righteous do you got to be? In other words,
Yeah, it's not. This is in the hands of the Almighty. Like this is not something that we make decisions on.
So whether you're righteous enough, right?
thank you.
I don't know. We'll get to a little bit of what happens, with these two resurrections and what happens and how with the idea of Olam Haba, which is the next thing we want to talk about.
Do we only resurrect one time, or is this the concept of transmigration and reincarnation?
No, we're not. This is not reincarnation. Reincarnation is something else. Reincarnation is where the body dies and the soul gets swapped into another body in this world. This is an entirely different world. After the 6,000 years is done, moved on to another phase where everyone, all humans, they get back body and soul. They get judged. That could be very temporary. That's not a rebirth of something entirely new. That's not what we're talking about. That's reserved for the righteous. The idea of a seed going to the ground, something else entirely emerging, right? Maybe those people won't die. That's something entirely different. That's reserved for the righteous. There's a question there, yes. I'll get to you in a second. Sorry.
In the way of God, they're talking about reincarnation. He was talking about at the end that when you're reincarnated or when you rise up again, some souls will be obliterated because they're going to have to go through the judgment. So is your judgment coming from all the different times you've come, or through the last time you came in?
Yeah, this is a good question. There's a lot of questions that once you talk, I specifically on the onset said I want to talk about reincarnation because it's very hard to find classic sources about it, and it's also it's a hot button topic in Jewish philosophy. I wanted to deal with things that are found in the Talmud, things that are substantiated by Maimonides. Yeah, but there's a lot of questions like, well, which body do you get? If there's multiple bodies, well, what about spouses?
Right.
These are all good questions, and I have answers actually. I have theories at least. Once you ask the question,
Confuse me. I had to read it and read it again.
I think with regards to like which body, I think it's either the first one, which is the original one. Everything else is just I guess bodies that you kind of use for their purpose. Maybe it's the last one. That's the one that completed. Maybe it's a composite. Maybe it doesn't matter because a body is a body is a body. Those are my 4 potential answers to that question.
They're kind of like the Messiah. It's like, well, it's not for us to know, so it's like
Right. So, but it's reincarnation. I don't want to talk about reincarnation because I don't think that really deals with the things that are of the other world. It's more like in this world. So you have a body with a mission. You don't fulfill your mission. You come back again. Right. Lather, rinse, repeat. Vitaly.
Yeah, I just wondering, are there any thoughts in the classical sources to practical considerations? So now you're righteous, you're sprung off, fully closed. What's tomorrow? Do you get your bank account back? Do you get some plot?
Yeah. Okay. So what emerges? So what emerges? So that's what I wanted to.
Still not, we went back to the resurrection idea,
Yes. We're going back to that. That's right. So I think there's the resurrection for everyone, no matter how righteous, how wicked. In order to have judgment, in order to close your place, in order to have closure, so to speak, on the human, we have to have an evaluation. Evaluation is only possible body and soul. Reward and punishment is only possible body and soul, or at least, yeah. Let's I'm going to amend that a little bit slightly, but it's because it's the human, and then their issue is done. There's this higher level of resurrection that is where the body that emerges is different than the body that went in. Now, if you guys remember, we talked about that Tchias HaMesim, resurrection, is different than the body that we have today. The body today is made with water, and the body that we made that is made later is made with earth. Now, who else do we know whose body was made out of earth? Adam. Did you say Gollum? Is that what you said? Adam. Now, which Adam? We talked about something. There's Adam. There's Adam during that first week, and then there's a regular Adam. It's the Adam of that first week. Now, in Jewish philosophy, when we talk about Adam, you always have Adam before the sin and Adam after the sin. It's because it's two different humans, not just two different realities, and two entirely different descriptions of what a human is. The original Adam, his modality was soul dominating body, as if the exact opposite of what we are today. We today, as humans post facto, we are a body where that body's the host, the body's the dominant. We have the soul in us. We have like a speck of a soul in us. Now, the soul is very powerful. The soul's eternal. But in our view, in our life, in our circumstances, in our consciousness, the soul is very, 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 very insignificant compared to our body. Adam was the exact opposite. Yes, he had a body. But his body was not significant to him at all. It was the soul was entirely dominant. The body was there. That's Adam, and Adam's body is formed from the earth to the ground. We're told that when we are resurrected, the tzaddikim, the righteous people they're resurrected and they're formed with earth. What we're hinted to over here is the fact that this reality that's going to exist with the tzaddikim, with the righteous, after they're resurrected, when something new sprouts, what's this new thing that sprouts, right? What's this reality? It's in something entirely different. The soul is in total control, total dominion. The body is just there. It's just like a vessel that holds the soul, right? It's just there, but it's not significant at all. Perhaps we could say like this. The seed that goes into the ground, the investment, so to speak. What's the investment? The investment is the life that someone lived, the behavior that someone had, the priorities, the accomplishments, the deeds, the actions, the Torah, the mitzvah that someone did. That's what goes into the ground. What are all those things? Those are all actions of soul. Those are actions of soul on one end, empowering the soul, like we mentioned earlier. Tikkun Olam on empowering our soul, and also saying no to the body, withholding from the body, right? Limiting, mitigating, right? Weakening the body. That is what goes into the ground. That's the seed. And thus what emerges? That reality. When someone places the soul, the agenda of the soul, in priority before the body, right, they're investing in their future. Because what emerges is the reality. To the degree in which someone was able to make a primary the soul's agenda in this world, that is the degree in which their soul is going to be dominant when it emerges. Thus, it is something new, and it's an investment. It's like a seed, so to speak. It's the core of what you invested in your life goes into the ground, and what emerges is something entirely different, but it's the development of that idea. And what does that look like? It's an entirely different paradigm. It's as if you're riding on top of the donkey, so to speak. Right? Suddenly the soul is in control, and the body is just there. You know? But that's only for tzaddikim, only for the righteous people. Only they who invest their time in that, only they have that reality. If someone does not invest in time, then they'll come back, yes, but they'll come back for perfunctory reasons only, because you need to be judged. You know, once you're judged, that's it. You didn't, if you didn't invest in that kind of life, well, then you don't get those kind of repercussions or those benefits. Those benefits are, like you said, it's an investment. It's a seed you put into the ground. Something else is going to emerge, and the seed is at the core of the seed, it is the same DNA of the result, but it's something that has to sprout, so to speak. If you don't have the seed, you don't have the result. If you don't have the core, at least the element of of the lifestyle, of the behavior, of the attitude, of the priorities, of the agenda, of the soul being dominant. If you don't have the Torah, if you're not following the Torah, well, then what do you expect to emerge? Whatever you put in, that's what emerges. What's the question there?
Just to stay, whenever we were thinking about this octave, I was thinking about Moses and how, how his soul dominated and his face shone and the relationship he had with God was so great. And someone made me think, so when you were talking, I was thinking about it would be like a lot of Moses people walking around, I mean, that was just the imagery that I had.
So I have in my notes here, and Betty will attest to it, that I mentioned that as well. That Moses, Moses is a great manifestation of this idea where Moses created this new human, so to speak, where the roles are reversed. He created it in this world. He was the one who was able to have a total realization of this reality in this world. He didn't need to be reborn and put a seed into the ground and have that emerge.
Which maybe there were also a physical difference of some sort, whether they glow or, maybe,
I always had the
charismatic.
In the prayer after the candle lighting service from my Siddur talks about may the glow of our faces never be dimmed. Show us the glow of your face, Hashem, and we'll be saved. So that's the same kind of thing that we're asking. And then also the prayer for the talit talks about as you wrap it, that you're wrapped in the mitzvot, and that may you inherit a beautiful talit in the world to come. And I heard a teaching on that you can either have a beautiful talit or you can have one with a bunch of holes in it because it's woven and made up of all of the mitzvot that you do in your life. I thought that was interesting.
Very interesting, yes. Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to share one more point before we move on to the next phase here. Just a cool, I think, a textual reference to what we said here. The Talmud, by the way, uses very, very clipped, very precise wordings for what it says here. And I studied this at great length, this particular elements of the Talmud. And to me, it was always bizarre how it's structured. It talks about Chesed Meisim, and it mentions so many different kind of imagery and scenarios and kind of descriptions of what this is like. But according to this, like when the Talmud is talking about Antoninus and Rebbe talking about how you get judgment, so he describes a certain form of resurrection. That's a resurrection that's universal. Universal resurrection. And then it says as follows. So the words that it uses is like this. It says, so you have the king who has the two guards, and one's lame, and one's blind, and he judges them as one. So too, it says, the Almighty takes the soul, throws it into the body, and judges the human as one. So to me, it was very interesting. What paradigm do we have over here? It takes a soul and throws it into a body. Essentially, for everyone, the universal resurrection, which is just for judgment, which is not for the righteous, that is, you take a soul and throw it into a body. It's no different than the reality we have today. The body is still dominant. It's not changing anything. There's nothing new emerging here. It's not this new reality where the soul is in control and the body is just there because it needs to be there to hold it all together, so to speak. You take the soul and throw it into the body, just like we have a soul now, throw it in the entire body. It's no different. As opposed to what actually happens later. Well, no, it's a body that's formed out of earth, like Adam, and it's a reality wherein for the righteous, what they planted, that's what they reap. The relationship that they have with their soul, the soul in their body, the investment that they put in, that emerges in its full fruition at Chesed Meisim, and maybe they won't die. And this bleeds. I think it kind of leads in very nicely into Olam Haba. So Olam Haba means the next world. Olam Haba is the location of reward and punishment. And the Talmud always talks about having a portion of the world to come, meriting to have a share in the world to come, a portion or a share or a piece of the world to come. Now, till yesterday, I didn't really understand the interrelationship between Tchias HaMesim, reviving the dead, and Olam Haba. Because the Talmud says, or the Mishnah says actually, someone who says, and I mentioned this earlier, someone who says that there's no Tchias HaMesim, there's no resuscitation of the dead, there's no biblical source for it, has no portion of the world to come. If you reject the biblicity, which is the word I made up, the biblicity of resurrection, you have no portion of the world to come. Why not? Why not? Because the Talmud says, first line of the Talmud, if he rejects Tchias HaMesim, if you reject resuscitation, you don't have no part in resuscitation, in resurrection. Right? Tit for tat. What you do, that's what you get. If you say this doesn't exist, okay, it doesn't exist for you. Fantastic. But to me, it was like, wait a minute. We have two concepts here. We have resuscitation of the dead, we have Olam Haba. Right? We have dead coming back to life, and we have the world to come. Why are we saying that they're interrelated? That if you say I don't want it, I don't believe in it, you got no part of it. Why? They're separate things. One is dead people come to life, they get judged, and one thing is reward for the righteous. It turns out now it makes a lot of sense, because when it means reviving the dead, it means an entirely new reality emerging, right? A changing of the guards, right? It's a swapping of roles. The body and the soul are now changing. We're going back to Adam pre-sin, right? We're being formed out of earth. It's not the same thing. We're being formed like Adam, where the soul is dominant, the body is just there, to hold it together. That is the reality of a human in Olam Haba, in the world to come. Thus, if you get revived, just like everyone else, the soul is thrown into your body and you get judged as one. That's not necessarily an indication of Olam Haba. That doesn't mean you have a portion of what to come. That just means that's how you have to be judged, because that's who sinned, that's who gets judged. That's it. All right. For the tzaddikim, the resuscitation that we're talking about over here, for the tzaddikim, for the righteous, that is an entirely different thing. Where Olam Haba, where it's an entirely different world. It's almost an opposite world, where everything is just spiritual and the body is just there. But in fact, the Talmud even says that Olam Haba, there's no eating, there's no sleeping, there's no sex, there's no drinking. The body doesn't even need to have its agenda fulfilled. Just like I would say, dare I say, that if someone doesn't nourish their soul, well, they'll still live in this world, right? If you totally neglect your soul, will you live? Will you die? Cause of death? Lack of engagement of the soul? No. You don't need it, so to speak, to be alive in this world, because this is the world of the bodies. Thus, if your body's alive, you're alive. If your body's not alive, then you're dead. But if your soul's neglected, your soul's neglected. But you might still live. In the world to come, it's the opposite. Thus, all you got to do is swap the body and the soul. Okay, so if your soul has to be taken care of, if your body's neglected, you don't eat, you don't sleep, all those bodily activities, those don't need to be, because those are insignificant compared to the soul. You don't need to eat, you don't need to drink. Those things you have a body, yes, but its role is severely downplayed. Right? It's not what dominates. So the question is what do? You get your bank account. Those things are not relevant. Like anything that's related to the body is not relevant in this next world, because everything's reversed. It's all about the soul, and the body is just there. You can't even realize that you have it. Remember, Adam was walking around and he's naked. He didn't notice till after he sinned, right? Because the body was nothing. It wasn't something that was part of his purview. It wasn't important to him. It wasn't. And then he sinned, and suddenly the roles were reversed, and the body is important. Oh, I'm naked. What's going on here? He didn't notice till now. Why didn't he notice till now? Because just like you don't notice if your soul is missing something, or the palpitations of your soul are not present to us. We don't know. We're not aware of it. But what do you mean? You have a soul. How can you possibly? Because it's not the status vis-a-vis your body is not that important. In the world to come, it's the opposite. So to answer all the questions here, Olam Haba is the world of the souls, where souls have the role that our bodies have today. Our hope is that we could be part of the righteous people that are not just for convenience sake resuscitated to just be have a soul back in our body to be judged and that's it. Rather, our resuscitation is the one of the righteous, where our soul is an entirely dominant reality in our lives. And as consolation, we find the Mishnah starts off by saying, Kol Yisrael Yishem Chet Olam Haba. All of Israel has a portion of world to come. If you're Jewish, you should know you have a portion. There's some portion of Olam Haba that you'll have. Importantly, even Gentiles that you have a portion of world to come. A Gentile who puts their soul's responsibilities and agenda at a high value, they invest in their soul, well, they too, when they emerge, their soul will have its own importance. You know, and they'll have Olam Haba. You don't have to be Jewish to have Olam Haba, which is different, which is one of the differences that our religion has over the other religions. You don't have to be Jewish to have ultimate reward. But all of Israel has it. Now, the question is why? Like, why would all Jews just have it? If Olam Haba, and when we say Olam Haba, we're talking about the world that only people who are reborn in this new format, with the soul as the dominant host and the body just there, only those people partake in that world. If you don't have that, you don't partake in that world. Why would all Jews have a portion of the world to come? Two answers that I have. Maybe there's more answers. We know that Abraham, we mentioned this already earlier, Abraham is the founding father of Tikkun Olam. Founding father of the mission of humanity. Founding father of the Jewish people. And being part of the Abrahamic tribe, being part of the mission, being part of the team, being part of the efforts to fulfill Abraham's mission, just by being biologically part of this unit, like we said, the Jewish people are a unit, we have a portion of the world to come. Why? Because we are, through our existence, even if we do nothing, through our existence, we are part of the team that's working towards achieving this end. Interestingly, we know that a child gets a circumcision at day 8 of their lives. And what's the blessing that we say? Right? Blessed are you, Hashem, la'achniso b'risho Avram Avinu, to enter him into the covenant of Abraham. A child from day 1 almost is someone who's saying, you're Jewish, you're part of the team, you're part of the Abrahamic fraternity, you're part of the mission of Tikkun Olam. Cool idea here. Maimonides writes that there's some Jews who could lose their portion of world to come. Right? And he gives an entire list of all the greatest miscreants, severe offenders, people that do the most severe sins, murderers and rapists and whatnot. And at the end he says, someone who pulls their foreskin, who reverses their circumcision. Now, nowhere does it say that it's prohibited to pull your foreskin. It's not one of them. It's not one of the sins of the Torah. The question is why? Why is that sin included? Why is that deed? Why does that disqualify someone from having a portion of world to come? The answer is like this, guys. Listen. You're Jewish. You got a portion of world to come. Why do you have a portion of world to come? Because you're part of a team. That team is symbolized by our circumcision. If someone says, "Oh, I don't want to be part of this. I want to undo this. I want to kind of disassociate myself from the Jewish people. I want to opt out." Oh, okay. So then you're not judged as one of the Jews. You want to be on your own. You want to say I'm not part of the team. Okay, then only your merit can bring you into the world to come. Well, then you probably have no merit. You have on your own accord. Who said you have a portion of the world to come? Thus, the symbolism of someone saying I don't want to be part of the Jewish people. Well, okay, you don't want to be part of the Jewish people. Fine, you don't have to be part of the Jewish people. But then you're not part of the mission. You're not part of the team, and you're not guaranteed a slot in the world to come.
You lose an extra credit, right?
You lose what?
Extra credit.
Yeah, well, yes.
You get what you want. You didn't want to be a part of it, so you're not.
So joining Christianity is the same thing.
What if a Jew?
Idolatry.
Yeah. Well, if someone opts out, right?
That's out.
But can you fix that?
Oh yeah, of course. Every second that you're alive, you could always repent. You could always do tshuva. Always, every second. It's never too late unless you're dead. It's never too late. Like unless that seed is thrown to the ground, right? Till the seed is thrown to the ground, you have an option to change what that seed is. Right? Once it's in the ground, well then it's too late.
You're just saying, so if somebody is born through Judaism and is Jewish, then that person, say, gets older and says, gee, this doesn't make sense, I've been doing Judaism. So then perhaps the person becomes an atheist or agnostic, or maybe picks up, oh, I'm going to be a Muslim. I'm making this up. I don't know. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Well, no. Well, all I'm saying is the Rambam says that if someone pulls their foreskin and undoes their circumcision, then they're opting out. Would that extend to people that maybe make other choices to disassociate themselves from the Jewish people? Maybe.
So what I.
But I'm just saying, I'm trying to explain what the Rambam says, what Maimonides says, just to maybe understand what could possibly be the meaning behind this particular activity invalidating someone's or disqualifying someone's entrance into the world to come. But it's possible that other things might do that as well.
That's a euphemism, I think.
Maybe. The Bible says maybe.
And again, Hashem is the final judge.
Yes, of course. Now, so that's one reason why the Jewish people would automatically be granted a golden ticket. Another reason, the Rambam, again the Rambam, at the end of a different book, he talks about the Mishnah that says as follows, says, the Almighty wanted to benefit the Jewish people, therefore he increased them Torah and mitzvahs. The Almighty loves us, he wants to do good for us, therefore he gives us lots of mitzvahs, lots of restrictions, lots of commandments. Now, if the Almighty really loved us, maybe you would say, why so many? I'll go easy on them. So the Rambam asks the question, well, what does this mean that the Almighty loves us, he gives us so many mitzvahs, so many restrictions and commandments? Every restriction is a restriction, and every commandment is more responsibilities. Why is that an act of love? So the Rambam says like this, is when someone does a mitzvah perfectly, any mitzvah that may be, if you do it perfectly, you're guaranteed a slot in the world to come. Why? Doing a mitzvah perfectly is an act of a soul. And soul priority over the body. That's what it is. Thus, essentially, any mitzvah that you do perfectly, you are creating a seed that's going to go into the ground that's going to emerge with some degree, some element of soul being in control and body being less important. Thus, they might give us so many mitzvahs, because it's with so many mitzvahs, it's almost impossible to go through life without doing at least one of them perfectly. And once you do that, you're guaranteed a slot in the world to come, which is very interesting, you know. And thus, as Jews, we have all a portion of the world to come. We all have so many mitzvahs, and therefore we all have so many opportunities to do that one thing that's going to grant us this golden ticket, this reality that when we emerge, we have a portion of the world to come. Now, what is Olam Haba? And we said it's a place of reward and punishment. It's the ultimate reward. We talked about the ultimate reward when God does things, He does it perfectly. Thus, if God's going to give us reward, it's going to be a perfect reward. The Mishnah says in the book of the chapters of the Fathers, it says 1 second of repentance and good deeds in this world is greater than the entire world to come, and 1 second of pleasure and bliss in the world to come is greater than all of this world. Question is, which one's greater? Is it this world greater or the next world greater? The answer is that for what the purpose of this world is, which is action, activity, living in this reality where the body is dominant and overcoming that, empowering the soul, well, 1 second of opportunity in this world is greater than all the opportunity in the next world. Once you're in the next world, you have no more opportunity. Once you're dead, your time's up. However, with regards to reward, with regards to actually receiving the reward for our activities, well, that's what the next world's all about. Thus, 1 second in the world to come is equal to all the pleasures in this world. If you were to take all the pleasures in this world and pile them on with the ice cream and relationships and fancy cars and fancy houses and lots of money, pile it all together, and you're able to just amass and coalesce all the pleasures in the world together in one pill. Right? You're able to do all of that. Right? That wouldn't equal a second in the world to come. That's greater. It's an entirely different paradigm. You know? It's the world of reward, and it's spiritual reward. Remember, it's spiritual centric, and everything with spiritual is heightened. It's much greater. And even I would say, Maimonides writes this. Even the pleasures that we have in this world that are more spiritual are greater, infinitely greater than the physical pleasures. For example, like the pleasure of having fulfilled a legacy or living for a purpose. Those are soulful pleasures. And those are so much more intense, so much more long-lasting than the pleasures of the physical. Eating an ice cream, you eat it, it's done, right? We have a hint of this idea. That hint of idea of spiritual pleasures in this world kind of opens up the door to what is going to be in the world to come, and just gives us a little insight into that. But that's what it is. And Maimonides tells us, listen, we really cannot understand it. Just like a deaf person cannot understand what sound is, a blind person cannot be described color, so too, as humans and as individuals with a body-centric approach to life, where our soul is is insignificant compared to our body, at least that's how we feel, it's hard for us to understand what it's like to be if the opposite, is true. It's impossible. You try to explain color to a blind person. You can't do it. You can't do it. So too, you won't be able to explain what the world to come and the pleasure of the world to come are in compared to the insignificant pleasures of this world. And we mentioned before, we'll say it again. Moses described it as his face is as bright as the sun. And we also, a long while ago, but we talked about Olam Haba, the world to come, is compared to the sun. Just like the sun is beyond our perspective. We can look at it, but we really can't look at it. Right? It's beyond us. It's something that, it's in this world, but it's a little bit like the next world where it's just totally beyond. It's an entirely new reality. It's an entirely new reality because who we are as humans is different. Our soul is who we are, and our body is just there. And that's something we can't even imagine because it's so the entire diametrically opposed to what we are today. That's what it is, and that's the locale of reward and punishment, and it's spiritual reward and punishment. I want to just finish off by saying that there's other things to this. There's the long Shabbos with the idea of slaughtering the Yetzer Hara. We have the idea of tzaddikim floating like birds. We have the idea of the destroyed world. There's other ideas to that, but at the core of what this world is and how it ends, it's the 6,000 years, 2,000, 2,000, 2,000 of reaching to Tikkun Olam as individuals, as humanity. Number one, Messiah is universal acceptance of that. There's the two elements of reviving the dead, one for everyone, just as a convenient way to have reward and punishment. One for the tzaddikim, which is the seed that you plant in your life is going to come out into fruition afterwards, and hopefully you look more like Adam, where the body and the soul have an entirely new relationship, an interrelationship than they have today, and that is the reality in which you're able to be to receive the ultimate reward and punishment for your actions, thus the completion and fulfillment of the world's purpose. I apologize for going over time, but is there any questions? Yes. Go ahead.
I have a question. You said
Go ahead.
Tzaddik floating like birds. Tzaddik, from what I understand, is a righteous person.
Yes.
Okay, if you say they're floating like
Whoa,
birds...
I didn't explain that at all. I just said that there is this thing I'm not going to talk about.
Oh, well, I just was thinking about that.
You go ahead.
My image of... This is my image. I may be right, I may be wrong, but let me know. Is that if you have tzaddikim floating like birds, meaning that, not like you said earlier, not everybody's a tzaddik. Not everybody is a chassid, a tzaddik. So if they're floating like birds, I get the visual image that they're coming to us, or they're trying to.
No, I didn't give you the entire context.
Then
I just said I threw it out there that there's more to talk about. There's another question
I'm
here.
sorry.
You had mentioned, and maybe you explained it, I didn't catch it, but if you ignored your soul, and then you finally go to judgment, the soul and the body is together for the judgment purpose only.
Yes.
Okay, and the soul and body is wiped out, or just the...
Well, yeah, they're done. They're
The
done.
soul
They
is
have no...
also work.
Yes,
That's part of Hashem.
The soul, and very tragically, but the soul can, even though the soul, it's not a part of Hashem. Is that what you said?
Yeah,
No, it's not a part of Hashem. That's a
Isn't that
slight
the spark that
mistake.
we have?
It's a spark. It's a spiritual spark. It's not a part of Hashem. Remember, Hashem can't have any parts, right? It's something which is similar to Hashem. It's akin to Hashem, but it's not actual. Just semantics.
Yes,
but that's the
okay,
idea.
sure.
But yes, and that is the idea of kares. Kares means cut off. It's the worst punishment you can get, where even the soul gets forgotten. Olam Haba. It's terrible. But our hope is that we're one of the righteous people. That as Jews, we have a head start, but that we are going to have some measure of this reality in our future.
Is that world to come on the earth? Because we have the bodies. Is will it come?
Good question. I don't know.
Okay, just curious.
Okay.
Lots of good questions.
Oh, thank you, everyone. This was fantastic. And we will look forward to seeing you everyone next week. I hopefully won't go as overtime as I did today.